My phone didn't vibrate. It convulsed on the cold marble. 155 missed calls. That number didn't signal love or regret. In Derek's world, it meant he was losing control of something vital. He had texted me a command. "Don't call me," unaware it was the last shovel of dirt on his grave. I didn't just lock the door. I ignited the fuse to burn down the fake empire he had built on my back for 7 years. My name is Sophia Redmond, and at 32 years old, I had become an expert in the architecture of silence. I stood in the center of the living room of our penthouse on the 42nd floor, watching the Chicago skyline disappear behind a curtain of violent white. The blizzard had been raging since noon, turning the city into a blurred, ghostly version of itself. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the absolute zero temperature inside this apartment. I had spent the last 3 hours preparing a dinner that would never be eaten. The table was set with the porcelain we had bought in Paris, the heavy silver cutlery gleaming under the dim recessed lighting, and a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon that cost more than my first car breathing on the sideboard. It was our 7th wedding anniversary. 7 years. The number felt heavy in my mouth, like a stone I had been carrying for miles and was only just realizing I could put down. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. My reflection stared back at me, a pale woman in a silk dress that hung a little too loosely on a frame that had grown thin from trying to make herself small enough to fit into Derek's expanding ego. I was once an architect. I used to design structures that defied gravity, spaces that made people look up in wonder. Now, I was just another fixture in this expensive glass box. A woman who managed the household staff and ensured that Derek's shirts were starched to the correct stiffness. Derek, the brilliant venture capitalist at Apex Horizon. Derek, the man who could charm a boardroom into handing over millions, but couldn't be bothered to look his wife in the eye for more than 3 seconds. The silence of the apartment was broken only by the wind howling against the reinforced glass. He was late. He was always late. But tonight was different. Tonight was supposed to be the truce, the evening where we pretended that the last 12 months of icy distance and separate bedrooms hadn't happened. I checked the antique grandfather clock in the hallway. It was 2 minutes past 7. He had promised to be home by 6:30. I picked up my phone from the marble kitchen island. I did not intend to call him. I knew the rules. Derek hated to be interrupted when he was in what he called hunter mode. I simply wanted to check the time again. Perhaps to distract myself from the humiliating reality that I was dressed up for a man who had likely forgotten I existed. The screen lit up before I could even unlock it. A text message from Derek. My heart gave a pathetic little jump, a reflex born of habit, hoping for an apology or a valid excuse involving a multi-million-dollar merger. I swiped the notification open. Don't call me. I'm closing a deal. You aren't the center of the universe. I stared at the words. The letters seemed to float on the screen, detaching themselves from meaning and then slamming back into focus with the force of a physical blow. I blinked, confused. My finger hovered over the call log. I hadn't called him. I hadn't sent a text. I hadn't even opened the messaging app. The realization hit me with the clarity of the ice falling outside. He had sent this preemptively, or perhaps he was with someone else, and his phone had buzzed in his pocket. Maybe an alarm, maybe a spam notification, and in his guilt, in his arrogance, he assumed it was his nagging wife checking up on him. He had fired off that text to silence me before I could even speak. You aren't the center of the universe. That sentence was the key. It wasn't just a dismissal. It was an act of aggression. It was the culmination of a year of subtle digs. Of eyes rolled when I spoke about my day. Of him laughing at my desire to return to work. He didn't just not love me. He despised me. He despised the obligation of me. I put the phone down on the counter. Gently. I didn't throw it. I didn't scream. A strange, cold calm washed over me, numbing the extremities of my fingers. I looked back at my reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back looked tired. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. I looked at the dinner table. the perfect roast that was now lukewarm, the candles that had burned down an inch. "Enough," I whispered. The word was small, but in the cavernous silence of the penthouse, it sounded like a gavel striking a sounding block. I picked up the phone again. My hands were steady. I typed a reply, my thumbs moving with a precision I hadn't felt since I used to draft blueprints. I did not ask who he was with. I did not ask why he was so cruel. Those were questions for a wife who wanted to fix things. "I am not your wife anymore. Don't come home." I hit send. Then, I went to work. I walked over to the main control panel for the smart home system. This was my domain. Derek liked to think he controlled this house because he paid the mortgage. But I was the one who understood its veins and arteries. I had programmed the security protocols. I tapped the screen, entering the master override code. I navigated to the access settings. User, Derek, status, revoked, biometric entry, disabled, keypad, code, changed. I set the new code to the date of my college graduation. A day solely about my achievement. A day before I met him. The bolts on the front door slid home with a heavy, mechanical thud. It was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I didn't stop there. I engaged the perimeter lockdown mode, usually reserved for emergencies, which meant the elevators would not open on our floor without authorization from the inside panel. I walked back to the kitchen. 10 minutes had passed since I sent the text. The phone on the counter began to buzz. It wasn't a normal ring. It was a convulsion. The screen lit up with his name, over and over again. I watched it dance across the marble surface. 1 missed call, 2 missed calls, 5, 10. He wasn't calling to apologize. Derek didn't panic over a breakup text. He would have scoffed and ignored it until he came home to gaslight me in person. This intensity was different. This was frantic. This was the reaction of a man who realized he had left his wallet in a burning building. 20 minutes. The count rose to 80 missed calls. I walked over to the wine bottle. A 1998 Chateau Margaux. It was supposed to be a celebration. I pulled the cork. The rich, dark aroma filled the air, smelling of blackberries and old money. I walked to the sink. I didn't pour a glass. I tipped the bottle upside down. The dark red liquid gurgled out, splashing against the stainless steel, swirling down the drain like dirty water. It was a waste of $2,000. But the symbolism was worth every cent. I was pouring out the toxicity. I was draining the last 7 years of my life. 30 minutes. 155 missed calls. The buzzing finally stopped, replaced by a notification from the security app. Motion detected at front entry. I picked up the iPad that controlled the cameras. The feed showed the hallway outside our front door. The elevator doors were closed. Derek was standing there. He looked nothing like the composed, arrogant man in the bespoke suits who usually walked through that door. His hair was plastered to his forehead with melting snow. His coat was wet. He was hammering on the door with his fist, his mouth moving in what I knew were screams. Though the soundproofing of the penthouse reduced them to nothing, I zoomed in on his face. It wasn't anger. I expected anger. I expected the furious, tight-jawed look he gave me when I embarrassed him in public. But this was terror. His eyes were wide, darting around the hallway. He kept looking back at the elevator, then down at his phone, then pounding on the door again. He looked like a hunted animal. "Why are you so scared, Derek?" I asked the screen softly. "It is just a text message." But we both knew it wasn't. For Derek to lose his composure like this, he had to have lost something much more valuable than a wife. He was desperate to get inside. And it wasn't because he missed me. He needed something in this apartment. I watched him shiver. The hallway outside the penthouse was climate-controlled, but the storm had likely chilled him to the bone during the transit, and the building's heating system was currently in night mode. However, our entryway had a specific feature, radiant floor heating that extended into the hallway, a luxury I had insisted on so guests would feel warmth the moment they stepped off the elevator. I tapped the climate control icon on the iPad. Zone. Entryway hall. Status. On. I swiped the toggle to off On the screen. Derek slumped against the door, sliding down to the floor, his head in his hands. He was trapped. He couldn't go back down. I knew he wouldn't want to be seen in the lobby in this state, and he clearly couldn't leave whatever he was running from. He was stuck on the 42nd floor, in the cold, locked out of his fortress. I placed the iPad down next to the empty wine bottle. The apartment felt different now. It was no longer a cage. It was a fortress. And I was the commander. I picked up my phone again. The battery was drained from the onslaught of incoming calls, down to 12%. I scrolled past the wall of red notifications from Derek and found the one contact I knew would answer on the first ring. No matter the time, no matter the storm, Bianca. She picked up immediately. Sophia? Is everything okay? The weather news says the blizzard is getting worse. I did it, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, steady, deep, devoid of the tremor that had been there for months. Did what? Bianca asked, her investigative journalist instincts sharpening her tone instantly. Did you leave him? Better, I said, looking at the security feed where my husband was now frantically typing on his phone with shaking fingers. I locked him out, and Bianca, something is wrong. He is terrified. He has called me 155 times in 30 minutes. There was a pause on the other end of the line. 155 times? That is not a husband trying to save a marriage, Sophia. That is a man trying to save his ass. I know, I replied. I think tonight is going to be very long. I am coming over, Bianca said. Do not open that door. Do not let him in. I will take the service elevator. He won't think to block that. And even if he did, I know the codes better than the building manager. The service elevator is risky in this wind, I warned, though I knew it was futile. I have driven through war zones for a story. Sophia, a little Chicago wind won't stop me. Put the coffee on. We have work to do. The line went dead. I looked at the dark screen of my phone, then back at the reflection in the window. The ghost was gone. The architect was back, and I was about to dismantle Derek's life. Brick by brick. The service elevator dinged, a sharp, incongruous sound against the backdrop of the howling wind battering the windows. The doors slid open to reveal Bianca, shaking a layer of fresh snow from her trench coat like a wet terrier. She stepped into the hallway, her combat boots leaving small puddles on the dark hardwood. She didn't hug me. She walked straight to the kitchen island where the iPad was propped up, her eyes locking onto the grainy security feed of my husband slumped against our front door. He looks pathetic, Bianca said, stripping off her leather gloves. But it is a calculated pathetic. Look at his hands. He is not just cold. He is checking his watch every 30 seconds. I handed her a mug of black coffee. My hands were surprisingly steady. He has been out there for 45 minutes. He stopped banging on the door 10 minutes ago. Bianca took a sip, her gaze never leaving the screen. Sophia, think like the architect you are. Look at the structure of this situation. If a man gets locked out by his angry wife in a blizzard, what does he do? He goes to the Four Seasons. He goes to his club. He goes to a mistress. He does not sit in a freezing hallway risking hypothermia unless the thing he needs is inside the apartment and he needs it right now. His passport is in the safe, I said, running through the inventory of our shared life in my head. But he is not running. He has a merger meeting tomorrow morning, the Apex Horizon deal. It has been all he talks about for weeks. The merger, Bianca repeated. Does he have the files? He keeps everything on the cloud, I said. But then I stopped. A memory surfaced. A fragment of a conversation I had overheard 2 days ago while I was watering the ferns in the study. Derek had been on the phone, his voice low and urgent. No cloud. Hard drive only. I cannot risk a leak before signatures are dried. The laptop, I whispered. He brought his personal workstation home. It is a dedicated unit. High security. He never leaves it at the office overnight because he is paranoid about corporate espionage. Where is it? Bianca asked. In the wall safe in his study. We moved simultaneously. The study was down the hall. a room that smelled of mahogany and Derek's expensive cologne. It was a space I rarely entered. He had made it clear early in our marriage that this was his sanctuary, a place where serious business occurred, implying that my work was merely a hobby. I stood before the painting of the abstract ship that hid the safe. I swung the frame aside. The digital keypad stared back at me, a small grid of buttons waiting for a 6-digit code. "Do you know the combination?" Bianca asked, leaning against the heavy oak desk. "Please tell me you know it. Men like Derek always use something narcissistic." "He changes it every month," I said. "He thinks he is a spy, but he is predictable in his cruelty." I looked at the keypad. Last month, the code had been his own birthday. The month before that, the date he made his first million. But this month was different. This month was the anniversary of his mother's passing. He had been playing the grieving son card heavily with his board members lately, using her memory to soften his shark-like image. I reached out and typed the numbers: 041299, April 12th, 1999. The mechanism clicked. A soft, hydraulic hiss followed, and the heavy steel door swung open. "Bingo," Bianca said softly. Inside, the safe was not empty, but it was not organized either. It looked like a panic room for secrets. The silver laptop was there, sleek and cold, but sitting on top of it was a second phone, a cheap, burner model with a cracked screen, and a thick manila envelope. I reached for the laptop first, intending to just secure it, but the envelope caught my eye. It was thick, heavy with official seals. I pulled it out. The paper felt distinct, textured. It was a property deed. I unfolded the document, and the breath left my lungs as if I had been punched. It was the deed to the lake house, my grandmother's house, the property I had inherited 3 years ago, the one place on earth that was solely mine, a sanctuary I had explicitly kept separate from our marital assets. It was free and clear, or it had been. Attached to the deed was a loan agreement, a second mortgage, a high-risk, high-interest loan taken out 6 months ago for a sum of $400,000, and there, at the bottom of the page, was my signature. It was a good forgery. He had practiced the loop of the S, the sharp strike of the T, but it was a forgery. I had never signed this. I had never seen this loan officer. "He stole my house," I said, my voice trembling. "Bianca, he forged my signature and mortgaged my inheritance." Bianca snatched the papers from my hand, her eyes scanning the legal jargon. "Look at the beneficiary of the funds. It did not go to a joint account. It went to Crypto Vault Holdings." "He lost it," I said, the realization dawning on me with sickening clarity. The market crashed 2 months ago. He was leveraging everything on that new coin. He told me he was investing client money, but he was using my house to cover his own margin calls. "He is broke," Bianca said, looking up at me. "Sophia, he is not just a cheater. He is destitute. That is why he is panicking. If he does not get into this laptop to access whatever remaining accounts he has, or to fudge the numbers for the merger tomorrow, he is finished." I looked back into the safe. The burner phone was buzzing, a short, sharp vibration against the metal shelf. I picked it up. There was no passcode. His arrogance knew no bounds. He assumed no one would ever find this phone. Or perhaps he thought I was too stupid to check. The screen was open to a text thread. The contact name was simply VL. My stomach twisted. I expected love notes. I expected sordid details of a hotel rendezvous. I braced myself for the heartbreak of infidelity. But what I read was far worse. It was terrifying. VL. You have until midnight. Derek, if the funds are not in the offshore account, I am sending the audit logs to the SEC. Derek, sent 2 hours ago. I am fixing it. I just need to move some assets around. My wife is clueless. I will use her trust fund to bridge the gap. VL. I do not care who you rob. Just pay me. We are not going to jail for your incompetence. You cook the books. You fix the mess. Derek. Stop threatening me. Victoria. You are in this as deep as I am. VL. I am the daughter of the CEO. I am a victim of a rogue employee. You are the rogue employee. Remember that." I dropped the phone on the desk as if it were burning hot. "Victoria Lance," I whispered. VL is Victoria Lance, the daughter of his biggest competitor. "He is not just sleeping with her," Bianca said, reading over my shoulder, her face pale. "He is laundering money with her. Or at least, he was, until he lost it all. And look at that text. Sophia. I will use her trust fund. He was planning to drain your remaining accounts tonight. That is why he came home," I said, the pieces fitting together into a grotesque mosaic. The dinner, the anniversary, it was all a setup. He was going to get me drunk. Maybe wait until I was asleep, and then authorize the transfers. The text message, the "don't call me," it was probably meant for her. She was pressuring him. I felt a wave of nausea, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard rage. He wasn't just a bad husband. He was a predator. For 7 years, I thought I was building a life with a partner. In reality, I was just a resource to be mined. I was his financial safety net, his credit score, his unsuspecting accomplice. Suddenly, a loud, booming sound echoed through the apartment. It came from the front door. I grabbed the iPad. The feed showed blue and red lights flashing in the hallway. 2 uniformed officers were standing next to Derek. Derek was gesturing wildly, pointing at the door, his face twisted into a mask of righteous indignation. "He called the police," Bianca said, disbelief coloring her tone. "He actually called the police on you." "Of course he did," I said, grabbing the stack of forged documents and the burner phone. "He is desperate. He needs to get in here before I find this. He is gambling that I am just a scorned wife acting out, and that the police will force me to open the door to the lawful resident." I smoothed down my silk dress. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and wiped a smudge of mascara from under my eye. I needed to look perfect. I needed to look like the sanity in the center of his storm. "What are you going to do?" Bianca asked, moving to stand out of sight of the doorframe but close enough to witness everything. "I am going to end him," I said. I walked to the door. I could hear Derek shouting through the heavy wood now. "She is unstable. She has my medication inside. She has stolen my corporate property." I disengaged the locks, one by one. The heavy thud of the bolts retracting was the only sound for a moment. I opened the door. The hallway was freezing. The cold air rushed in, biting at my bare arms. But I didn't flinch. Derek stood there. Flanked by 2 large police officers, he looked like a drowned rat. His expensive Italian suit was ruined, soaked through and clinging to his frame. His hair was a mess. His eyes were wide, manic, bloodshot. "Officer, thank God," Derek panted, trying to push past me. "She has locked me out. She is having a mental break." I didn't move. I stood firmly in the doorway, blocking his path. I didn't look at Derek. I looked directly at the older officer, a sergeant with a kind but tired face. "Good evening, officer," I said, my voice calm, measured, the voice of a woman who had nothing to hide. "I apologize for the disturbance. I was unaware my husband was causing a scene." "Causing a scene?" Derek shrieked. "You locked me out. You stole my laptop." "Officer," I continued, ignoring Derek completely, "I have removed this individual from the premises for my own safety. I have evidence here that he has committed grand larceny and fraud against me." I held up the manila envelope. "That is a lie." Derek lunged for the papers, but the younger officer stepped in between us, pushing Derek back against the wall. "Sir, calm down," the officer barked. "This is the deed to my home," I said, opening the document and showing the signature page to the sergeant. "And this is a loan agreement for $400,000 taken out against it. That is not my signature. My husband forged it. I just discovered this in his safe." Derek's face went white. The frantic energy drained out of him, replaced by the stillness of absolute terror. He knew I had opened the safe. He knew I had everything. "And," I added, pulling the burner phone from my pocket, He seems to be involved in a significant financial crime involving a woman named Victoria Lance. I believe the threats on this phone regarding cooked books and SEC audits will be of great interest to your department's fraud division." "Give me that phone!" Derek screamed, struggling against the officer's arm. "That is my property. You have no right." "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria like a scalpel, "you left it in the safe in my apartment, and since you just accused me of theft, I am simply handing over the evidence to the authorities to clear my name." I handed the phone and the file to the sergeant. He looked at the texts on the screen, his eyebrows raising. He looked at the forged signature, then he looked at Derek. "Sir," the sergeant said, his hand moving to his belt, "we are going to need you to come with us. We need to sort this out at the station." "You cannot arrest me," Derek sputtered, looking from the police to me, his eyes pleading now. "Sophia, tell them it is a misunderstanding. Baby, please, the merger. I have the meeting tomorrow. I cannot be in jail." "You should have thought about that before you mortgaged my grandmother's house," I said. "But I live here," Derek yelled. "You cannot kick me out." "Actually," I said, stepping back and reaching for the door handle, "I can. The lease for this penthouse is in my name. I paid the deposit. I paid the rent for the last 6 months because you said your liquidity was tied up. You are a guest here, Derek, and your invitation has been revoked." I looked him in the eye. For the first time in a year, I really saw him. He wasn't a titan of industry. He was a fraud, a scared, small man who had built a castle on a foundation of lies. "Please," he whispered, the fight leaving him. "It is cold." "I know," I said. "I suggest you call Victoria. Maybe she has a spare room." I slammed the door. I locked the bolt. I turned back to the living room. Bianca was standing there, a slow, fierce smile spreading across her face. "That," she said, raising her coffee mug and a toast, "was masterful." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 7 years. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. "He is gone," I said. "For tonight," Bianca corrected. "But the war has just started. He will lawyer up. He will come for you with everything he has left." "Let him come," I said, walking over to the window to watch the police cruiser lights flashing 42 floors below. "I have the one thing he does not." "What is that?" "The truth," I said, and the password to his cloud backup. I hadn't told Bianca yet, but while I was in the safe, I had remembered one more date, the day he proposed. It was the only sentimental date he actually cared about, because it was the day he secured his financial future. I walked back to the study, sat down at his desk, and opened his laptop. I typed in the date. Access granted. The screen populated with files, thousands of them, emails, spreadsheets, chat logs. "Bianca," I called out, "get your notepad. You are going to want to write this down." The office of Harriet Sloane did not smell like vanilla or comfort. It smelled like espresso, ozone, and billable hours. Located on the 55th floor of a steel spire that looked down upon the courthouse like a hawk eyeing a field mouse. Harriet's domain was entirely made of glass and chrome. Harriet herself was a woman carved from granite, 60 years old with a bob cut so sharp it could sever an artery, and a reputation that made grown men in the financial district develop nervous tics. They called her the Iron Lady of Family Law. But as I sat across from her, watching her review the printed screenshots from Derek's cloud backup, I thought a better nickname would be the Grim Reaper of Assets. "He is not just an adulterer, Sophia," Harriet said, her voice a low, gravelly rasp that commanded attention. She didn't look up from the documents. "He is a financial tumor. If we proceed with a standard divorce filing, he will hide assets. He will cry poverty. He will drag this out for 3 years while he funnels every cent of marital funds into offshore accounts or crypto wallets that are harder to trace than a whisper in a hurricane." "I know," I said. "That is why I hired you. I do not just want a divorce. Harriet, I want justice." Harriet finally looked up. Her eyes were a piercing, icy blue behind rimless glasses. Justice is a concept for poets and priests. In this room, we deal in leverage and liquidation. You want to hurt him? We do not break his heart. We break his bank. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a strategic roadmap. We are going to execute a scorched earth policy, Harriet explained, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. You found evidence of fraud. Specifically, the forgery on your grandmother's house and the threats regarding cooked books. That changes the game. We are not filing for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. We are filing for a freezing injunction based on the dissipation of marital assets for criminal enterprise. He will fight back, I said. He has the company lawyers. Let him, Harriet smiled, and it was a terrifying expression. He has already started. She was right. 2 hours later, while I was setting up a temporary command center in a hotel room, a courier delivered a heavy envelope. It was from the legal department of Apex Horizon. The letter was a masterpiece of corporate aggression. It demanded the immediate return of stolen corporate property, specifically the encrypted laptop and the burner phone, and threatened to sue me for theft of trade secrets, industrial espionage, and breach of confidentiality. They were demanding damages of $5 million if the devices were not returned within 24 hours. My hands shook slightly as I read it. $5 million. It was a number designed to terrify me into submission. I called Harriet. Read the third paragraph, she said, sounding bored. They are bluffing. They cannot sue you for finding a laptop in your own safe. They say I accessed proprietary data, I said. Did you? I accessed the cloud backup using a password he gave me years ago, I replied. Technically, I guessed it based on our history. Good, Harriet said. Now, here is our response. We are not giving the laptop back to Derek, and we are certainly not giving it back to Apex Horizon to let them scrub the evidence. So, what do I do with it? You have already done it, Harriet said. Remember the nice detective who arrested your husband? The one from the Economic Crimes Unit? You are going to formally surrender the evidence to him. You are a concerned citizen. You found potential proof of embezzlement and fraud, and you were terrified of being implicated. So you did the right thing and turned it over to the authorities. The brilliance of the move washed over me. By giving the laptop to the police, I stripped Derek of his ability to sue me. He couldn't demand the return of his property without admitting that the property contained evidence of a crime. If he sued me for stealing his fraud machine, he would be establishing his ownership of the fraud itself. It was a legal finger trap. The harder he pulled, the tighter it would get. We sent the response letter an hour later. It was 2 sentences long. Dear Counsel, please be advised that the items in question have been turned over to the Chicago Police Department, Economic Crimes Division, under case number 4920. Regarding an ongoing investigation into wire fraud and forgery, all further inquiries should be directed to Detective Miller. The silence from Apex Horizon was immediate and deafening, but we were not done. Phase 2, Harriet said over the phone. The freeze, because Derek had used my grandmother's house as collateral for his crypto losses. Harriet argued that he had commingled our assets to a degree that put my entire financial future at risk. A judge, seeing the forged signature, granted an emergency temporary restraining order on all joint accounts. I sat in the hotel room, logging into our primary banking portal. It was 7:30 in the evening. I knew Derek's schedule. If he wasn't in jail, and he likely wasn't, as his company would have posted bail to avoid the PR nightmare, he would be trying to project an image of stability. He would be at dinner. Specifically, he would be at Le Monde, the French bistro where he took all his high-profile clients to close deals. I navigated to the credit card settings, the platinum card, the one he used to flash around like a badge of honor. Status, active. I clicked the toggle, status, frozen, reason, suspected fraud. I imagined the scene, the waiter bringing the leather folio, Derek laughing, perhaps a little too loudly, trying to reassure a nervous investor or worse, Victoria Lance, that the arrest was all a misunderstanding. He would slide the black card into the folio without looking. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged. A notification from the bank app. Transaction declined. Le Monde. Amount: $640.50. Another ping. Transaction declined. Le Monde. Attempt 2. I pictured the waiter returning to the table, leaning down to whisper the embarrassing news. "I am sorry, sir." The card was rejected. Derek's face flushing red. He fumbled for another card. The corporate card. Perhaps. Only to remember that the company lawyers might have suspended his privileges pending the internal audit triggered by my letter. He would have to ask his guest to pay. The humiliation would be absolute. But the biggest revelation of the day did not come from a bank statement. It came from the private investigator Harriet had put on the VL mystery. His name was Coleman, and he looked like a librarian. But he could find a needle in a digital haystack. He met me at Harriet's office the next morning. "Victoria Lance," Coleman said, sliding a dossier across the glass table. 26 years old, only daughter of Marcus Lance, the CEO of Vanguard Capital. They are Apex Horizon's biggest rival in the tech sector. "He is sleeping with the enemy," I said, flipping through the photos. Victoria was beautiful, in a sharp, modern way, blonde bob, expensive clothes, eyes that looked intelligent but guarded. "It is more than sleep," Coleman said. "I pulled the chat logs from a secondary messaging app on the cloud backup you accessed. Derek has been grooming her for 6 months. He is pumping her for information about her father's upcoming bids. That is the corporate espionage they accused you of. He was projecting. He is the spy." "Does she know?" I asked. "Does she know he is using her?" "I do not think so," Coleman said. "The texts suggest she is genuinely in love with him. But here is the kicker. Sophia, look at the profile he created on the dating app where they met." I looked at the screenshot Coleman pointed to. It was a profile for Derek R. Age 35. Under marital status, it did not say married, it did not say separated, it read, widower. I felt the air leave the room. "He told her I was dead?" "Not you specifically," Coleman clarified. "He told her his wife died in a car accident 2 years ago. He played the tragic, grieving survivor who was finally learning to love again. That is how he hooked her. Victoria Lance has a reputation for being tough, but she has a soft spot for broken things. He weaponized her empathy." "He erased me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He did not just cheat. He killed me off to make himself more appealing." "Do we tell her?" Harriet asked, tapping her pen on the desk. "We could send this dossier to her father. It would destroy Derek's career by lunchtime." "No," I said, closing the file. "Not yet. If I tell her now, she might not believe me. She might think I am the crazy ex-wife he warned her about. He has probably already spun a story about me being mentally unstable. That explains the arrest and the locking him out. He will tell her I am stalking him." "So, what is the play?" Harriet asked. "We let her find out," I said. "We let the truth sit there like a time bomb. Victoria is smart. She is the daughter of a shark. Eventually, the math won't add up, and when she realizes she has been sleeping with a liar, she won't just leave him. She will destroy him for us." I stood up. I had one last thing to do to close the chapter on my old life. I drove back to the penthouse one last time. It was midday. Derek was likely at his office, trying to put out the fires I had started, or at a lawyer's office trying to unfreeze his assets. I didn't go inside to pack. I had already taken what mattered: my clothes, my drafting supplies, and my dignity. I went there to ensure the space was as inhospitable as he had made my life. I walked through the empty rooms. The silence was different now. It wasn't oppressive. It was hollow. I went to the utility room. The electricity, water, and internet for the penthouse were all under a bundled service package in my name. I had paid these bills for 7 years because Derek claimed it was too much administrative hassle for him. I called the provider. "Yes," I said to the operator, "I am moving out today. I would like to terminate the service immediately." No, I do not wish to transfer the billing responsibility to the other resident. He can open his own account. Yes, cut it all. Now. I watched as the smart lights in the hallway flickered and died. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. The ambient glow of the thermostat faded to black. The apartment was now a cold, dead shell. I took the service elevator down. Bypassing the lobby, I got into my car and drove north, away from the Gold Coast, away from the pretension and the noise. I pulled up to a small, converted warehouse in Andersonville. It was a studio apartment, 400 square feet. The brick walls were exposed. The floor was concrete. And the light that poured in through the industrial windows was honest. It cost less for a month than what Derek spent on wine in a week. I carried my drafting table up the stairs myself. I set it up in the center of the room. That night, as I sat on a mattress on the floor, eating takeout noodles from a carton, I imagined Derek returning to the penthouse. I imagined him swiping his keycard, only to find the electronic lock unresponsive because the power was out. I imagined him forcing the door with a physical key, stumbling into the pitch-black darkness. No heat, no water to wash off the shame of the day, no internet to check his dwindling crypto accounts. He was a king in a castle of ice, ruling over absolutely nothing. I took a bite of my noodles. They tasted like freedom. I opened my sketchbook, a fresh page, and picked up a charcoal pencil. For the first time in a year. My hand didn't shake. I began to draw. Not a house for a client, but a structure for myself. A foundation that wouldn't crumble. The war was far from over. But the first battle belonged to me. The silence in my new studio apartment was fundamentally different from the silence in the penthouse. The penthouse silence had been heavy, pressurized, a vacuum waiting to be filled by Derek's moods. The silence here, in this converted warehouse in Andersonville, was raw and open. It smelled of brick dust and potential. But as I sat on the floor, surrounded by the cardboard boxes that contained the remnants of my life, I found that peace was elusive. The adrenaline of the initial escape had faded, replaced by a dull, aching bruise in the center of my chest. It was the specific agony of looking back at a road you had walked for 7 years and realizing that every signpost had been a lie. I spent the first 2 days just staring at my old portfolios. These were designs I had created during the early years of our marriage, structures of glass and light that I had abandoned because Derek convinced me they were inadequate. I remembered the nights I sat crying at the kitchen table because he had told me, with that faux sympathetic tilt of his head, that the developers found my work too feminine or structurally naive. I had believed him. I had believed that he was protecting me from the harsh realities of the industry. I had believed that I was the problem. But as I sifted through the recovered files from his cloud backup, specifically a folder labeled Correspondence, the truth began to bleed out like ink on water. I found emails sent from Derek's account to the very contractors and developers I had tried to court years ago. Subject: Sophia Redmond proposal. Body: heavy emphasis on unstable. Do not engage. My wife is going through a difficult mental health period. Her designs are just a therapeutic hobby. Please politely decline. He hadn't protected me. He had clipped my wings. He had systematically dismantled my career before it could even take flight, ensuring that I would remain at home, dependent on him, available to manage his life and warm his bed. He needed a wife who was a trophy, not a peer. The betrayal was so intimate, so calculated, that I had to run to the bathroom and retch until my stomach was empty. It wasn't just the money. Money can be earned back. He had stolen 7 years of my purpose. My phone rang, pulling me out of the spiral. It was Derek. Again. He had moved past the threats of lawsuits. Now, he was in the bargaining phase. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the transcription. Sophia, please, pick up. I am sleeping in my office. They froze my corporate card. I know you are angry, but think about us. Think about Cabo. Think about the vows. I did this for us. I took the risks to build an empire for our children. Please, baby. I can explain the signature. It was a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back next week. Do not throw away 7 years over a misunderstanding. For our children, I whispered to the empty room. We didn't have children. He had always said the timing wasn't right, that he was too stressed, that we should wait until the market stabilized. A knock at the door interrupted his pleading voice. I checked the peephole. It wasn't Derek. It was a man in a dusty flannel shirt and work boots, holding a rolled-up set of blueprints. I opened the door. Can I help you? Sophia Redmond? The man asked. He had a kind face, weathered by wind and sun, the kind of face that didn't know how to lie. I am Leo. Harriet Sloane gave me your address. She said you might need a contractor who works for cash and doesn't ask questions about why a woman is living in a warehouse. Harriet is thorough, I said, stepping back to let him in. Leo looked around the sparse studio, his eyes landing on the sketches I had taped to the brick wall. He walked over to them, studying the lines with a quiet intensity. I know this style, Leo said, tapping a drawing of a cantilevered library. You submitted a bid for the Greystone project 4 years ago. I was the head foreman on that site. I felt a flash of shame. I didn't get that job. They said I lacked experience. Leo turned to look at me, his brow furrowed. That is not what happened. We loved this design. The lead engineer fought for it. But then your husband called the firm. He told the partners that you had plagiarized the concept from a student thesis. He threatened to sue them if they hired you, said it would bring bad press. The air left my lungs. He said I plagiarized it? Yeah, Leo said, shaking his head. We thought he was a jerk, but we couldn't risk the lawsuit. I always wondered why a husband would sabotage his own wife. Now I guess I see the picture. The validation from this stranger, this man with drywall dust in his hair, was the first real thing I had felt in weeks. Leo didn't see a mental case or a hobbyist. He saw an architect. I need to build a workspace, I said, my voice trembling slightly. And I need to do it cheap. We will make it work, Leo said, rolling up his sleeves. I have some lumber left over from a job in Lincoln Park. You draw it. Sophia, I will build it. As Leo began to measure the windows, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID made my blood run cold. Eleanor, Derek's mother. She was a woman who wore pearls to breakfast and wielded guilt like a scalpel. I hesitated, then answered. I was done hiding. You ungrateful, vicious little girl. Eleanor's voice shrieked through the speaker before I could even say hello. How dare you? Derek is sleeping on a sofa in his office. He tells me you stole his laptop? You locked him out of his own home in a blizzard? After everything he has done for you? You were a nobody when he found you. Hello. Eleanor, I said, my voice steady. I see Derek has given you his version of events. He told me everything. He told me you are having a breakdown. He is trying to protect you, and you destroy his reputation? I am calling my lawyer. We will sue you for defamation. Before you do that, I cut in, you should check your email. I just sent you a PDF. I do not want your emails. It is a bank statement. Eleanor, from your retirement trust, the one Derek manages for you. There was a pause on the line. What are you talking about? Look at the withdrawal dated June 14th of last year. $200,000. The authorization signature is yours. But you were in Italy that week, were you not? I heard the rustling of paper. Or maybe she was tapping on a tablet. The silence that followed was heavy. That is impossible, Eleanor stammered. Derek said the market was down. He said my dividends were lower because of the recession. The market is fine. Eleanor, I said, Derek forged your signature. He used your retirement money to cover a margin call on a crypto gamble. He stole from his own mother. I heard a gasp, a sound of pure devastation. For all her faults, Eleanor worshipped her son. To realize he had cannibalized her future to save his own skin was a blow that shattered her worldview. He wouldn't, she wept. He is my boy. He did, I said. And if you want to see the rest of your money again, you need to help me. I know his father set up offshore accounts for him when he was a teenager, accounts that are not in the marriage records. If you tell me where they are, I can try to freeze them before he drains those too. It took 3 minutes of sobbing, but she gave me the names of the banks in the Cayman Islands. She wasn't fighting for him anymore. She was fighting for her survival. Derek had managed to alienate the one person who would have loved him unconditionally. I hung up the phone and looked at Leo. He was watching me, a tape measure in his hand, a look of profound respect on his face. "Rough family," he noted. "I am pruning the family tree," I said. Then came the message I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. It arrived at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. "Unknown number. I know who you are. We need to talk. V.L. Victoria Lance." I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop in neutral territory, a quiet place in Ravenswood where neither of us would be recognized. I arrived early, sitting in a corner booth with my back to the wall. When Victoria walked in, she didn't look like the femme fatale I had imagined. She looked exhausted. Her expensive coat was buttoned wrong. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked like a woman holding on to a cliff edge by her fingernails. She sat down opposite me. She didn't order anything. "I did not know," she said. Her voice was brittle. "I swear to you, he told me he was a widower. He cried about you. He said your name was Sarah, and that you died on Lakeshore Drive." "My name is Sophia," I said gently, "and I am very much alive." "I know," she said, looking down at her hands. "My father's security team ran a background check on him after the arrest. When the report came back, I threw up." "He used you, Victoria," I said. "He was using you to get data on your father's bids." "I know that too," she whispered, "but it is complicated." "How is it complicated?" I asked. "He is a fraud. He stole from me. He stole from his mother. He is likely trying to steal from your father." Victoria took a deep breath. She placed a hand on her stomach. The gesture was small, protective, and terrifyingly universal. "I am pregnant," she said. The world stopped for a second. Of all the scenarios I had played out, this was the variable I hadn't calculated. "He was so happy when I told him," Victoria continued, tears spilling over. "He said it was destiny. He said he had always wanted a family but never had the chance. He promised me that once this merger was done, we would go public. He wants this baby. Sophia, even if he is a liar about the money, maybe he really loves the child?" I looked at this young woman. She was holding on to this pregnancy as the one true thing in a sea of lies. She wanted to believe that Derek's love for his unborn child was the redeeming factor that proved he wasn't a monster. I reached into my bag. Harriet had given me the medical files from our insurance history. I had pulled them specifically for the divorce proceedings to prove that we had no dependents. But now, they served a darker purpose. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "Read the date," I said. Victoria picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the medical jargon. "Patient, Derek Redmond. Procedure, vasectomy. Date, November 12th, 5 years ago." "I do not understand," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "He had a vasectomy?" "5 years ago," I said mercilessly. "He did it without telling me. I spent 3 years taking fertility treatments, injecting myself with hormones, thinking I was the broken one. He watched me cry over negative tests every month. Knowing full well he had sterilized himself. He never wanted children. Victoria, he made sure of it." Victoria stared at the paper. "But I am pregnant. The doctor confirmed it." "Then either it is a medical miracle, which is statistically almost impossible," I said, "or he is not the father." Victoria's face went white. "There is no one else. I have not been with anyone else." "Then the vasectomy failed," I said. "It happens, but that is not the point. The point is that he thinks he is sterile. If he told you he wants this baby, he is lying. He is playing a role. In his mind, he is either trapping you, or he plans to leave you the moment he gets what he wants from your father's company. He deceived both of us about his ability and his desire, to bring a life into this world. I watched the realization shatter her. The romantic illusion of the repentant father dissolved. She saw him now, not as a flawed man who loved her, but as a sociopath who would fake joy over a pregnancy he believed was impossible or unwanted, just to keep his leverage. "He lied to me about his wife," Victoria whispered, her voice hardening. "He lied to me about his job, and he lied to me about his body." "He lies about the weather," I said. "It is all he knows." Victoria wiped her face. The sorrow was evaporating, replaced by the same cold fury that had fueled me in the blizzard. She was a lance. After all, her father was a shark. It seemed the trait was hereditary. "He needs my father's capital to cover the theft from your accounts," she said, her mind working fast now. "He thinks he can use the baby to guilt my dad into a bailout." "Probably," I agreed. "He has a meeting with my father tomorrow," Victoria said. "He thinks I am still on his side. He thinks I am at home, knitting booties and waiting for him to fix everything." She looked up at me. Her eyes were dry now. "I am going to destroy him," she said. "Get in line," I replied. "But we can do it together." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold, but her grip was strong. We were the wives of a ghost, the unexpected sorority of Derek's victims, and as we sat there in the quiet cafe, I knew that Derek had made a fatal error. He thought he was juggling women. In reality, he had just handed us the knives. The coffee shop meeting with Victoria Lance had shifted the axis of the war. We were no longer reacting to Derek's chaos. We were curating it. The plan we devised was not a crime of passion. It was a demolition project, and like any good demolition, it required structural analysis, precise timing, and the strategic placement of explosives. Derek was drowning. The freeze on our joint accounts, combined with the pending police investigation into the forgery, had choked his liquidity. He was desperate. And as any venture capitalist knows, desperation is the mother of bad investments. He needed a massive influx of capital to cover the hole he had dug in the crypto market before the quarterly audit at Apex Horizon exposed him. If he could show a tentative agreement for a high-value deal, he could delay the auditors. He could survive. We decided to give him exactly what he wanted. I spent 3 days locked in my studio, not sleeping, fueled by caffeine and vengeance. I wasn't designing a home. I was designing a mirage. I created a full architectural proposal for a luxury eco-resort in Costa Rica. I named it the Verdant Horizon. I rendered breathtaking 3D images of bamboo villas floating over turquoise water, a zero-carbon spa, and a private airstrip. It looked like paradise. It looked like a $100 million opportunity. It was completely fake. The land did not exist. The permits were fabrications I photoshopped from old public records. The environmental impact study was a document I generated using jargon-heavy filler text. Victoria played her part perfectly. She went to Derek, feigning ignorance of his financial ruin. She told him that through her personal connections, implying her father's network, she had found a silent investor looking for a partner to manage a massive hospitality project. She told him the investor wanted to move fast, that they needed a firm with bold vision. Derek, blinded by his own ego and the terrifying ticking of the clock, didn't question it. He didn't ask for due diligence. He saw a lifeline. Then came the legal trap. I sat in Harriet's office as we drafted the investment contract for the Verdant Horizon. We included a clause, Section 8, Paragraph C, buried deep within the pages of boring liability text. The managing partner, Derek, agrees to full and immediate personal financial transparency. Any failure to disclose existing liabilities, pending litigation, or insolvency within 24 hours of signing will result in an immediate penalty of $5 million payable to the silent investor and an automatic confession of judgment. It was a poison pill. Derek would sign it because he was arrogant enough to think he could hide his debts, or desperate enough to think he could fix them before anyone checked. But before he could sign the deal with Victoria's investor, he needed to clear the decks. He needed to be free of me. Harriet called his lawyer with our settlement offer. "Sophia wants out," Harriet told them. She is tired of the fighting. She is willing to walk away. She will waive all claims to spousal support. She will sign over her 50% stake in the marital shares of Apex Horizon stock. In exchange, she wants the penthouse, which is already in her name, and complete uncontested ownership of her intellectual property and architectural portfolio. It was a Trojan horse. Derek thought the Apex Horizon shares were his golden ticket. He believed that once he landed the Costa Rica deal, the stock value would skyrocket. He didn't realize that I knew the company was already hollowed out by his embezzlement. I was offering him 100% of nothing in exchange for my freedom. The signing took place in a neutral conference room 3 days later. Derek walked in looking thinner, his eyes darting around the room, but he wore a smirk that he couldn't quite suppress. He thought he had won. He thought he had bullied me into submission. He saw a woman who was cutting her losses. He didn't see the woman who was cutting his throat. "You are making the right choice, Sophia," he said as he clicked his expensive pen. "You were never cut out for this world. You need a simpler life." I didn't look at him. I looked at the papers. "Just sign, Derek." He signed with a flourish. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the sound of a lock clicking open. I signed next, but I didn't sign Sophia Redmond. For the first time in 7 years, I signed my name, the name on my birth certificate, the name of the woman who had won awards before she became a shadow, Sophia Valenti. "Done," Harriet said, snatching the papers before the ink was dry. "The divorce is final pending the judge's stamp, which we will get this afternoon. You are legally single, Mr. Redmond." Derek stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Good. I have a celebration to attend. Business is booming. Sophia, you should have stuck around." "I am sure it is," I said. "Goodbye, Derek." He walked out of the room without looking back. He was already texting Victoria. I turned to Harriet. "Is it done?" "It is done," Harriet said. "You are free." And he just signed his death warrant. The celebration Derek mentioned was a gala he had hastily organized at a rented event space in the Loop. He billed it as a new era party for Apex Horizon. He spent money he didn't have on champagne towers, a jazz band, and ice sculptures. He invited every partner, investor, and rival in the city. He intended to announce 2 things that night: his engagement to Victoria Lance, and the launch of the Verdant Horizon project that would save his company. I wasn't invited, of course, but Victoria was the guest of honor. I sat in my studio, watching the live stream from a guest's social media feed. The room was glittering. Derek was holding a microphone, his face flushed with triumph and alcohol. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek announced, his voice booming over the speakers, "tonight is about rebirth. It is about shedding the dead weight of the past and embracing a future of limitless potential. I am proud to announce that Apex Horizon has secured the contract for the most ambitious eco-resort in Central America." The crowd applauded politely. "And," Derek continued, searching the crowd, "I want to invite the woman who made this possible to join me on stage, the love of my life, the future Mrs. Redmond. Victoria, darling, come up here." The spotlight swept across the room. It searched for the blonde bob, the shimmering dress. The room went silent. The spotlight moved back and forth. Victoria was not there. Instead, the double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. It wasn't a woman in a gown. It was a team of 4 people in gray suits, carrying briefcases. They were followed by 2 uniformed officers. I leaned closer to my screen. The lead auditor stepped into the spotlight. The music died. The murmur of the crowd turned into a confused buzz. "Derek Redmond?" the man asked, his voice cutting through the silence without a microphone. "Who are you?" Derek demanded, the smile faltering on his face. "This is a private event." "I am Special Agent Miller from the Securities and Exchange Commission," the man said. He held up a document. "And these are auditors from the State Financial Oversight Board. We are executing a warrant for the immediate seizure of all Apex Horizon records and assets." "What?" Derek laughed. A high-pitched, nervous sound. "This is ridiculous. I just signed a deal worth millions. The Verdant Horizon project? Agent Miller asked. We are aware of the contract you signed this morning. The one where you attested to your solvency. We have received a tip that the project is a shell, and your declaration of funds was fraudulent. Furthermore, we are here to serve you with a lawsuit filed by Miss Victoria Lance regarding economic espionage and unauthorized access to Vanguard Capital's proprietary data. The crowd gasped. Phones were raised. The humiliation was being broadcast live to the entire financial world. Victoria? Derek stammered. No, she is my fiancée. She is the plaintiff, Agent Miller corrected. She provided us with the digital evidence recovered from a laptop turned into the police 3 days ago. The laptop contained proof that you have been selling Apex Horizon client data to cover personal gambling debts. Derek's face went the color of ash. He looked at the door, waiting for Victoria to run in and tell them it was a mistake, but she wasn't coming. She was likely sitting in her own apartment, eating ice cream and watching him burn. Just as we had planned. The Ghost Project had done its job. It had baited him into signing a contract that legally bound him to reveal his finances right at the moment he was most vulnerable. By signing the deal with the transparency clause, he had invited the audit himself. If he refused the audit, he owed the $5 million penalty, which he didn't have. If he accepted the audit, they would find the embezzlement. Checkmate. Mr. Redmond, the agent said, stepping onto the stage. I need you to step away from the podium. Derek looked at the crowd. He looked at his investors, who were already backing away, making frantic phone calls to their lawyers. He looked at the champagne tower, the symbol of the success he felt entitled to. I have rights, Derek whispered, but the microphone caught it. I have a wife. You are divorced, sir, the agent said, checking a notification on his tablet. The decree was filed at 4 o'clock today. You have no wife, you have no fiancé, and as of this moment, you have no company. I watched as Derek slumped. It wasn't a dramatic faint. It was a physical deflation. The structure of his arrogance simply gave way because the foundation had been removed. He had lost the woman who built him up, and he had lost the woman he tried to use as a ladder. He stood alone on the stage, the spotlight harsh and unforgiving, illuminating every drop of sweat on his forehead. I closed the laptop. The studio was quiet. I picked up my charcoal pencil. I looked at the drawing of the house I was designing for myself. It had strong walls. It had clear windows. It had no hidden safes. Goodbye, Derek, I said into the silence. I turned off the lights and went to sleep. It was the first dreamless sleep I had enjoyed in 7 years. The spring thaw in Chicago arrived not with a gentle warmth, but with the violent cracking of ice on the lake, a sound that echoed the breaking of my own chains. 3 months had passed since the night of the gala. The night Derek's empire of smoke and mirrors had collapsed on live television. In that time, the silence in my life had transformed from a void into a canvas. I stood on a stage in Milan, the lights blindingly bright against my eyes. The presenter, a distinguished Italian architect with silver hair, was speaking into the microphone, but his words felt distant. He was announcing the winner of the Global Visionary Design Award, and then he said my name, Sophia Valenti, not Sophia Redmond. That name had been incinerated in the bonfire of Derek's vanity. I walked to the podium to accept the heavy crystal prism. The winning design was titled The Glass Cage. It was a concept for a women's shelter that utilized transparent, high-strength materials to create spaces of safety that did not feel like prisons. I had drawn the initial sketches at 3 a.m, sitting on the floor of the penthouse bathroom while Derek slept off a drunk rage in the next room. I had poured my isolation into the graphite, turning my trauma into structure. The judges called it hauntingly beautiful. I called it an exorcism. Winning that award was the signal fire. My phone, which had once been a device of terror, became a tool of creation. Investors who had previously dismissed me as Derek Redmond's wife were now calling to speak to the rising star of the architectural world. I did not go back to a big firm. I did not want to answer to another man in a suit. I used the prize money, along with the settlement from the sale of my grandmother's house, which Harriet had miraculously recovered from the bank by proving the fraudulent nature of the loan, to lease a space in the West Loop. It was an old brick building with high ceilings and terrible plumbing, but it was mine. I hung the sign above the door myself. Valenti Architects. Leo was there on the first day. He wasn't just my contractor anymore. I had offered him a partnership. It was unconventional to make a builder a partner in a design firm, but I was done with convention. I needed someone who understood how things held together when the world was trying to tear them apart. "The sign looks straight," Leo said, standing on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets. He was wearing a clean button-down shirt, though he still looked like he wanted to be holding a hammer. "It is straight," I said, dusting off my hands. I measured it 3 times. "We have 3 clients already," Leo said, looking at the tablet I had bought him. "The library renovation in Evanston, the boutique hotel in the Gold Coast, and that private residence for the tech CEO. We take the library first," I said. "Books are honest. Tech CEOs can wait." Our relationship had shifted, settling into a rhythm that was as sturdy as the foundations Leo poured. There were no grand gestures. There were no expensive dinners where silence was the main course. Instead, there were shared coffees at 6 in the morning over blueprints. There were arguments about load-bearing walls that ended in laughter rather than insults. He respected my mind. When I spoke, he didn't look at his watch. He looked at the drawings. It was a slow burn, a warmth that started in the extremities and worked its way inward, thawing the parts of me I thought were permanently frozen. While I was rising, Derek was plummeting. The fall of a narcissist is rarely graceful. After the SEC raid, Apex Horizon was dissolved. The assets were frozen, seized, and liquidated to pay back the investors he had defrauded. Derek was fired, of course. But it was worse than that. In the finance world, losing money is a sin, but getting caught stealing it is a heresy. He was blacklisted. His name became toxic. The country clubs revoked his membership. The friends who had drunk his champagne now crossed the street to avoid him. Harriet told me the news over lunch one Tuesday. "He is selling the penthouse," she said, biting into a salad. "The bank is foreclosing, but they are allowing a short sale to recoup costs quickly. He has to liquidate everything. The Ferrari is gone. The watch collection is gone. He is sleeping on a friend's couch in Naperville, and I use the term friend loosely." "The penthouse," I repeated. "It is going for pennies on the dollar," Harriet said, eyeing me over her glasses. "It is a distressed asset. It has bad juju. No one wants it." "I want it," I said. Harriet stopped chewing. "Sophia, why? That place is a mausoleum of your misery." "I do not want to live in it," I said. "I want to own it." We set up a shell company, Phoenix Holdings, a generic name that hid my identity completely. Derek, desperate for cash to pay his criminal defense lawyers, accepted the lowball offer without a second thought. He signed the deed over to the faceless corporation, likely thinking he had unloaded a burden. He didn't know he had just handed the keys back to his jailer. Possession day was a week later. I didn't bring furniture. I brought sledgehammers. I invited Leo and a crew of 5 guys. We took the service elevator up to the 42nd floor. The apartment was empty, stripped of the art and the expensive rugs. It looked smaller without the clutter of Derek's ego. "So," Leo said, looking around the expansive living room with the marble floors I had always hated because they were too cold to walk on barefoot. "What is the plan, boss? A remodel?" I looked at the wall that separated the kitchen from the living area. It was the wall Derek used to stand behind when he was ignoring me. I looked at the master bedroom door, the threshold I used to cross with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "No," I said, picking up a sledgehammer. It was heavy, the wood handle rough against my palms. "Not a remodel, a resurrection." I walked over to the wall. I didn't hesitate. I swung the hammer with every ounce of strength in my body. Crack! The drywall splintered. Dust puffed out into the air. The sound was loud, violent, and incredibly satisfying. "Tear it all down," I ordered the crew. "I want an open concept. I want light. I want this to be the new headquarters for Valenti Architects. We are going to put drafting tables where the dining table used to be. We are going to put a model workshop in the master bedroom." The crew went to work. The sound of destruction became a symphony. For 3 weeks, we gutted the place. We ripped out the marble. We tore down the silk wallpaper. We exposed the steel beams and the raw concrete. We stripped the veneer of luxury to reveal the honest structure underneath. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that he appeared. We were in the middle of the demolition. The front door had been removed, replaced by a temporary plastic sheet to keep the dust in. I was standing in what used to be the foyer, reviewing plans with Leo. I was wearing jeans covered in plaster dust and a hard hat. I looked nothing like the porcelain doll Derek had married. The plastic sheet was ripped aside. Derek stood there. He looked like a ghost of himself. His suit was wrinkled, the collar of his shirt gray with grime. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were bloodshot, yellowed at the edges. He smelled of stale bourbon and desperation. "You," he croaked. The construction crew stopped working. The silence that fell over the room was heavy, but it wasn't the fearful silence of the past. It was the silence of a predator being observed by a pack of wolves. "Hello, Derek," I said. I didn't step back. I didn't cross my arms. I stood my ground. "You bought it," he slurred, stepping into the room, his shoes crunching on the debris. "My lawyer told me, Phoenix Holdings, it is you. You are the Phoenix. It is my building, Derek," I said calmly. "You are trespassing." "You took my home," he shouted, his voice cracking. He gestured around the ruined apartment. "Look at this. You are destroying it, just like you destroyed my life. You vindictive, heartless bitch." Leo stepped forward, his posture shifting into something protective. But I put a hand on his arm to stop him. I didn't need Leo to fight this battle. "I did not destroy your life, Derek," I said, my voice cutting through the dusty air. "I just stopped carrying it." "I made you," he spat, staggering closer. "You were nothing. I gave you this life. I gave you the clothes on your back. And you repaid me by humiliating me, by stealing my deal, by turning Victoria against me." He was crying now, ugly, self-pitying tears. He looked around at the exposed beams. "Why? Why buy it just to wreck it? Is this your sick revenge? To smash the place where we were happy?" "We were never happy here. Derek," I said, "you were powerful here. I was a prisoner." I looked at him, really looked at him. I searched for the fear I used to feel. I searched for the love I used to think I had. I found neither. I felt only a profound, hollow pity. He was a man who had defined himself by what he owned, and now that he owned nothing, he was nothing. "You are so cruel," he whispered, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "I gave you 7 years. I took a step closer to him. I looked him dead in the eye. "I only returned exactly what you invested in my life. Derek," I said. "Lies." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, grasping for a retort, for a threat, for anything to reassert his dominance. But he had no leverage left. The bank accounts were gone. The reputation was gone. The fear was gone. "Leo," I said, not looking away from Derek. "Call security." "Already here," Leo said. 2 large security guards from the building lobby appeared in the doorway behind Derek. They knew me. They liked me. They had seen how Derek treated the staff for years. "Mr. Redmond," the lead guard said, his voice deep and final. "You need to leave." Derek looked at the guards, then back at me. He snarled, a feral sound, but he let them take his arms. He didn't fight. He didn't have the strength. As they dragged him out, his heels leaving lines in the dust on the floor. He kept looking back at me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to show a sign of guilt. I watched him disappear into the elevator. The doors slid shut. I stood there for a moment in the quiet. I waited for the crash of emotion. I waited to feel sad, or angry, or triumphant. But I didn't feel any of that. I looked at the open space where the walls used to be. I looked at the sunlight streaming in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I felt light. I turned back to Leo. He was watching me, his eyes kind and steady. "You okay?" he asked. "I am fine," I said, and for the first time in 7 years. I meant it. I picked up the sledgehammer. "Let us get back to work," I said. "We have a firm to build." I swung the hammer again, and the sound of breaking stone sounded exactly like the first beat of a new heart. The year that followed the divorce was a season of quiet reconstruction. If the previous 7 years of my life had been a winter of discontent, this was the spring. My studio, Valenti Architects, had grown from a warehouse experiment into a legitimate force in the Chicago design world. We had 12 employees, a backlog of projects that stretched 18 months into the future, and an office in the very penthouse where my marriage had died. I sat at my drafting table, looking out at the skyline. The walls were gone, the marble was gone, the space was filled with light, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, and the hum of creative collaboration. Leo was in the conference room, laughing with a structural engineer about load tolerances. We were not living together, not officially. We maintained separate residences, a boundary I insisted on to ensure I never felt trapped again. But he was the anchor in my life. He was the solid earth beneath my feet. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the peace shattered. It arrived not with a bang, but with a courier envelope. My assistant, a bright young woman named Chloe, placed it on my desk with a frown. "It is a legal summons. Sophia," she said quietly, "from a firm I do not recognize." I opened the envelope. The document inside was thick, heavy with accusation. Plaintiff, Cross Associates, Defendant, Valenti Architects, Charge, Intellectual Property, Theft and Corporate Espionage. I read the cover letter, my blood turning to ice. Gavin Cross. He was an old rival from graduate school, a man with mediocre talent but a trust fund large enough to buy his way into the industry. He was accusing me of stealing the design for the Glass Cage project, the award-winning women's shelter design that had launched my new career. He claimed he had sketched it 5 years ago and that I had accessed his files during a brief internship we shared. It was a lie, a blatant, laughable lie, but in the world of high-stakes architecture, an accusation was enough to freeze funding and scare away clients. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. The spam folder." I opened my laptop. My hands were trembling, a physiological reaction I thought I had trained out of my system. I navigated to the spam folder. There was one email. The subject line was blank. I clicked it open. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment, a single image file. I hesitated. My cursor hovered over the file. Then, I clicked. The image filled my screen. I slammed the laptop shut instantly, the sound echoing through the quiet office like a gunshot. It was a photo of me. I was asleep in the master bedroom of this very penthouse. 3 years ago, I was wearing nothing but a sheet, my back exposed, my face turned toward the pillow in vulnerable, unconscious exhaustion. It was intimate. It was private. And it had been taken from an angle that suggested the photographer was standing right beside the bed. "Derek." My phone buzzed again. Another text. "I have 300 more. Some are much less modest. I also have videos. You looked so peaceful when you did not know I was watching." A second text followed immediately. "Gavin Cross is a friend of mine. He is willing to drop the lawsuit. All you have to do is buy the rights to the design from him. The price is $5 million. If you do not pay within 48 hours, the lawsuit goes forward, and these photos go to every client, every architectural board, and every tabloid in the country. They will say you slept your way to the top. They will destroy the saintly image you have built." I felt bile rise in my throat. I stood up. knocking my chair over. Leo was at my side in 3 strides. "Sophia? What is it? You look like you have seen a ghost." "He is back," I whispered. "He is back, and he is working with Gavin." 10 minutes later, the War Council was assembled in the glass-walled conference room. Harriet Sloane was on speakerphone. Bianca was pacing the floor, her heels clicking a furious rhythm. Leo sat next to me, his hand gripping mine so hard his knuckles were white. I had shown them the text. I could not bring myself to show them the photo, but I described it. "This is revenge porn," Harriet growled through the phone. "It is a felony in Illinois. We can have him arrested. He is using a burner number," Bianca said, throwing her hands up, "and the email came from an encrypted server in Switzerland. If we go to the police now, he will panic and release the photos before they can trace him. Once those images are on the internet, they are there forever. My career, my reputation." My voice broke. The shame was a hot, heavy blanket. I was a respected professional. I was a role model for women in the industry. If these images were released, the narrative would shift. I would not be the talented architect. I would be the scandal. $5 million, I said, looking at the table. "I can liquidate the securities. I can take a loan against the building. Maybe I should just pay him. If I pay him, he goes away." "No," Leo said. His voice was low, dangerous. "Absolutely not. You do not feed a wild animal and expect it to stop biting. If you give him $5 million today, he will want $10 million next year. He will own you again." "Leo is right," Harriet said. "This is not about money for Derek. It is about power. He wants to prove he can still control you. He wants to humiliate you." "But how did he get the photo?" Bianca asked, stopping her pacing. "He took it 3 years ago. You scrubbed his devices. You wiped the cloud." "He must have kept a copy," I said. "On a drive I missed." "No," Harriet said. "Think about the timing. He knew about the Gavin Cross lawsuit before it was even served. He knew exactly when to text you. He knew you were at your desk. He is not just reacting. Sophia, he is watching." "Watching?" I looked around the room, paranoia prickling my skin. "You mean cameras?" "Digital watching," Harriet said. "I am sending Coleman over, now. Coleman, the private investigator who looked like a librarian. Arrived within the hour. He didn't look for bugs in the lamps. He sat at my computer. He plugged in a diagnostic drive and began to type lines of code that scrolled faster than I could read. He worked in silence for 20 minutes. Then he stopped. "Got him," Coleman said. We crowded around the screen. "It is a rootkit," Coleman explained, pointing to a string of hidden characters. "A piece of spyware. It is not on your new laptop. It is on the cloud account you use for archiving old projects, the one you shared with him during the marriage." "I changed the password," I said. "I changed it the day he moved out." "You changed the password," Coleman agreed. "But you did not revoke the trusted device tokens. He cloned his access 3 years ago. He has been sitting in your digital attic, watching every file you upload, every email you draft. He saw the legal threats coming from Gavin Cross because he helped draft them. He has been waiting for you to build up enough cash to make the squeeze worth it." "He is in the room with us," I whispered. "Right now." "Technically, yes," Coleman said. "If I disconnect him now, he will know we found him. He will trigger the release of the photos." "So we are trapped," I said. "No," Leo said, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. "We are not trapped. We have a direct line to his brain. He thinks he is the spy, but a spy who believes false intelligence is a dead man walking." "A honey trap," Bianca said, her eyes lighting up. "We feed him a lie, something so juicy he cannot resist using it." "What does Derek want more than anything?" Harriet asked. "Money," I said. "And proof that I am as corrupt as he is. He hates that I am the moral one." "Then let us give him a sinner," Harriet said. We spent the next 6 hours crafting the perfect lie. Coleman created a folder in the compromised cloud drive. He labeled it Project Osprey, offshore, inside, we planted a series of fabricated documents. First, a bank statement from a shell bank in the Cayman Islands, showing a balance of $12 million. Second, a series of emails between me and a fictional contractor, discussing how we had been skimming money from the Glass Cage project to avoid U.S. taxes. Third, a memo detailing how I had paid a bribe to the judges of the Global Visionary Design Award to ensure my win. It was a masterclass in fiction. It painted me not as a victim, but as a tax-evading, bribing, fraudulent mastermind. It was exactly the version of me Derek wanted to exist. It validated his hatred. It justified his actions. If he sees this, Leo said, he will not just want $5 million. He will want everything. And he will use this to threaten me, I said. He will think this leverage is stronger than the photos. The photos embarrass me. This sends me to federal prison. Exactly, Harriet said. And that is how we catch him. We uploaded the folder. Then we waited. The silence in the office was suffocating. The sun went down. The city lights flickered on. We ordered takeout that no one ate. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Coleman's monitor pinged. Activity, he said. He is accessing the Osprey folder. He is downloading the bank statements. He is reading the bribe emails. Come on, Derek, I whispered. Take the bait. He is disconnected, Coleman said a minute later. He has the files. Now came the gamble. If Derek was smart, he would anonymously leak this to the IRS. But Derek wasn't smart. He was greedy, and he was arrogant. He wouldn't want the IRS to take my money. He would want to take it himself. My phone buzzed. Change of plans. I read the text aloud to the room. I know about the Cayman account. Sophia, $12 million? You are naughtier than I thought. I do not want $5 million anymore. I want 10. Wire it to the crypto wallet address below by noon tomorrow. If you do not, I send the bank statements and the bribery emails to the FBI. The photos will just be the cherry on top. He took it, Bianca exhaled. He actually took it. Now for the kill, Harriet said. Reply to him. Tell him you need time. Tell him the bank requires a specific authorization code. Tell him to email the demand to your private secure email so you can forward it to your banker as a consulting fee invoice. I typed the response. My thumbs felt heavy. Derek, please, I cannot move $10 million that fast. The bank in Cayman needs a paper trail. Send the invoice and the threat to my secure address. Sophia, Private Valenti Arch, com. I will pay. Just do not release the files. It was the plea of a defeated woman. It was exactly what he needed to hear. 10 minutes passed, the longest 10 minutes of my life. Then, a notification popped up on my laptop screen. New email. From D. Redmond, 88protonmail.com. Subject: Payment for silence. Body. As discussed. Transfer $10 million to the attached wallet immediately. Failure to do so will result in the release of evidence regarding your tax evasion and bribery schemes. He had attached the fake documents we planted. He had written out the blackmail demand in clear, undeniable English. He had signed it with his digital fingerprint. He sent it, I said. Coleman spun his chair around. And where does that email address forward to? Sophia? It auto-forwards, I said, my voice steady. To the intake server of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Cybercrimes Division, specifically, to the inbox of Special Agent Miller, the man who raided his party. We also BC'd the district attorney, Harriet added with a satisfied smirk. Extortion involving a demand greater than $1,000 is a felony. Extortion involving interstate commerce and digital threats? That is 20 years. Easy. And Coleman added, since he attached the stolen documents, he just admitted to accessing your computer unauthorized. That is a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. I looked at the email on my screen. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a confession. What happens now? I asked. Now, Leo said, standing up and pulling me into a hug that squeezed the breath out of me. We let the law work. You do not have to pay him a dime. The moment he hit send, he handcuffed himself. My phone rang. It wasn't a text. It was a call from Agent Miller. I put it on speaker. Mrs. Valenti? Miller's voice was crisp. We just received an automated forward from your server. We have analyzed the headers. We have a location on the sender. Is it him? I asked. It is coming from an IP address registered to a motel in Cicero, Miller said. We have a warrant signed. We are rolling out units now. Do not engage with him further. You are safe. I hung up. The room was quiet again. But the fear was gone. The anxiety that had gripped my throat for the last 12 hours had dissolved, replaced by a deep, exhaustion-soaked relief. He tried to use my shame against me, I said, looking at the dark window where my reflection stared back. He tried to use my body against me, but in the end, he was brought down by his own greed. He thought you were hiding a crime, Bianca said. He never imagined you were inventing one. It is over, Leo said, kissing the top of my head. Not yet, I said, picking up my purse. Agent Miller said they are rolling out now. I want to see it. Sophia, Harriet warned, that is dangerous. I will stay in the car, I said, but I need to see him in cuffs. I need to know the monster is actually in the cage. Leo looked at me, then nodded. I will drive. We walked out of the office, leaving the lights on. The city of Chicago was cold and windy, but the air tasted clean. We got into Leo's truck and headed west, toward Cicero, toward the end of the long, dark night. The final wave was about to crash, and I intended to be there when the tide went out for good. The federal courthouse in Chicago was a fortress of limestone and gravity, a place designed to make the individual feel small and the law feel absolute. I sat in the front row of the gallery, my hands folded in my lap, watching the back of Derek's head. He had refused the plea deal. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elena Ross, had offered him 5 years in exchange for a guilty plea on the extortion and wire fraud charges. It was a generous offer considering the mountain of evidence we had handed them on a silver platter, but Derek Redmond did not plead guilty. Narcissists never do. To admit guilt is to admit a flaw. And in Derek's fractured reality, he was not the criminal. He was the victim of a vindictive ex-wife and a corrupt system. He insisted on going to trial, not to save himself, but to use the witness stand as a pulpit to destroy me. He wanted to drag my name through the mud, to expose the fake crimes I had planted in the honey trap as if they were real, hoping that if he threw enough dirt, the jury would see us both as filthy. He sat at the defense table, wearing a suit that was clearly bought off the rack, a stark departure from the bespoke Italian wool he used to wear. His court-appointed lawyer, a weary man named Mr. Clark, looked like he would rather be anywhere else. But Derek was animated. He was whispering furiously, scribbling notes, posturing for the jury. He thought he could charm them. He thought he was the smartest person in the room. The trial began with the prosecution laying out the facts of the extortion. They displayed the email Derek had sent to the FBI intake server, the one he thought was my private inbox. They showed the demand for $10 million. They showed the attached fabricated documents. It was a slam-dunk case, technically, but then it was Derek's turn to speak. He took the stand in his own defense, a risky move that Mr. Clark had clearly advised against. Derek smoothed his tie, smiled at the jury, 6 men and 6 women who looked back at him with impassive faces, and began his performance. I did not want her money, Derek said, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. I was trying to expose her. Sophia Valenti is not the saint she pretends to be. She is a tax cheat. She bribes judges. I found evidence of her crimes in the Cayman Islands. And when I confronted her, she entrapped me. I sent that email to force her to confess, not to steal from her. I am a whistleblower, not an extortionist. He was good. I had to give him that. For 7 years, he had convinced me that I was crazy. Now, he was weaving a narrative where he was the hero trying to bring down a corrupt architect. I saw a few jurors glance at me, doubt flickering in their eyes. The fabricated documents we had planted were convincing. That was the point. And Derek was using them to paint a picture of my moral decay. Then, it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand. I swore the oath. I sat down and looked directly at Derek. He smirked. A tiny, imperceptible curling of his lip. He thought I would be defensive. He thought I would be the hysterical woman he had mocked for years. "Mrs. Valenti," the prosecutor asked, "can you tell the court the nature of your relationship with the defendant?" "He was my husband for 7 years," I said. My voice was low, clear, and steady. "And for 7 years, I believed he married me for love. I believed our life was a partnership. But I recently discovered that the foundation of our marriage was a transaction he calculated long before we even met." "Objection!" Derek shouted from the defense table. "Relevance!" "Sustained," the judge said, peering over her glasses. "Stick to the charges. Mrs. Valenti." "The charges are extortion," I said, turning to the judge. "The defendant claims he was acting as a moral whistleblower. He claims his character precludes him from committing a crime for money. I have evidence that proves his character is entirely defined by financial predation." I nodded to the prosecutor. Elena Ross stood up. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to enter Exhibit G into evidence. This is an audio file recovered from a digital voicemail archive on an old cloud account belonging to the defendant, which Mrs. Valenti gained legal access to during the discovery phase of her divorce." "Mr. Clark objected, but the judge allowed it. The courtroom went silent. The clerk pressed play. The sound of static filled the air, followed by the clinking of glasses and background laughter. It was a recording of a butt dial, a call Derek had accidentally made to his own voicemail 7 years ago, likely while his phone was in his pocket at a bar. Derek's voice boomed through the speakers. It was younger, drunker, but unmistakable. "No. Man, listen to me. It is a done deal. She's a total fool. I found this little architect. Quiet, insecure, daddy issues. She has a trust fund she does not even touch. And more importantly, she is a citizen. I marry her. I get the green card expedited, and I use her property portfolio as collateral for the firm. 5 years, tops. I will milk the assets, build the portfolio, and then dump her once I have the golden parachute. It is not a marriage. Dave, it is an acquisition." Laughter erupted on the tape. Cruel, raucous laughter. "To Sophia!" Derek's voice toasted on the recording. "The golden goose!" The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I looked at the jury. The doubt was gone. The women on the panel looked horrified. The men looked disgusted. Derek sat frozen at his table, his face draining of all color. He had forgotten that call. He had forgotten that in his arrogance, he had recorded his own confession of intent 7 years ago. "He called me a golden goose," I said into the microphone, my eyes never leaving Derek's face. "He did not extort me because he found a crime. He extorted me because his acquisition did not pay out the way he planned. He was simply trying to collect on an investment he thought he was owed." Derek couldn't speak. The narrative of the whistleblower had been incinerated. He wasn't a hero. He was a predator who had played the long game and lost. But we weren't done. "The prosecution calls Victoria Lance," Elena announced. The doors opened. Victoria walked in. She looked different from the broken girl I had met in the coffee shop. She wore a sharp black suit. Her head was high. She walked past Derek without even glancing at him, treating him like a piece of furniture. She took the stand. "Miss Lance," Elena asked, "you were in a relationship with the defendant?" "I was," Victoria said. "He told me he was a widower. He told me he wanted a family." "And did you become pregnant?" "I did," Victoria said. "I was overjoyed. Derek told me it was a miracle. He used the pregnancy to pressure me into asking my father for a bailout for his company. He said he needed the money to secure our child's future." "And what did you discover?" Victoria took a deep breath. "I discovered that Derek Redmond had a vasectomy 5 years ago. He knew he could not have children. He knew the pregnancy was impossible, or that if it was real, it was a medical anomaly he had insured against. He looked me in the eye, touched my stomach, and lied about a future he had physically sterilized himself to prevent. He did not want a child. He wanted a hostage to use against my father. A gasp went through the gallery. This wasn't financial fraud. This was biological betrayal. It was a level of sociopathy that made the blood run cold. Derek stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "She is lying," he screamed, his composure finally shattering. "She is a whore. She slept with someone else. That baby is not mine." "Sit down, Mr. Redmond," the judge barked, slamming her gavel. "It is a conspiracy," Derek yelled, his eyes wild, darting around the room. "They are all working together. Sophia, Victoria, they framed me." He looked at his lawyer, Mr. Clark, who was trying to pull him down. Derek shoved him away. "And you," Derek pointed a shaking finger at a man sitting in the back of the courtroom, his original corporate attorney, Mr. Henderson, who had been subpoenaed to testify about the forged deed. "You told me it would work. You told me the forgery was untraceable." The room erupted. Mr. Henderson, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, stood up, his face purple with rage. "I object. Attorney-client privilege. Privilege does not cover the commission of a crime." "You idiot!" Derek shrieked, fully unhinged now. "You gave me the pen. You showed me how to trace her signature on the lightbox. You said if we got the loan, we could cover the crypto losses before she noticed. You are in this as deep as I am." "I did no such thing," Henderson shouted back, forgetting himself in the heat of the accusation. "I have emails. Derek, I have emails where you explicitly ordered me to notarize the document without her presence. I told you it was illegal, and you threatened to fire the firm." "You took a cut," Derek screamed. 20%. I have the wire transfer receipts on the laptop." "Order! Order in this court!" The judge was standing now, banging the gavel with force, but the damage was done. In his desperation to spread the blame, Derek had just confessed to the forgery in open court and implicated his lawyer as a co-conspirator. He had torn down the last wall of his defense. He had cannibalized his own team. The bailiffs moved in, forcing Derek back into his chair. He was panting, his hair wild, sweat dripping down his face. He looked at the jury. They were staring at him with a mixture of fear and revulsion. He looked at me. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just watched him. I watched the realization wash over him, the realization that he had just talked himself into a cell. The rest of the trial was a formality. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They returned with a verdict that surprised no one. Guilty on 1 count of extortion, guilty on 2 counts of wire fraud, guilty on 1 count of identity theft, guilty on 1 count of forgery. The sentencing hearing followed immediately, as the judge had seen enough. She looked down at Derek from the bench. Her expression was not one of pity. "Mr. Redmond," the judge said, her voice echoing in the silent room. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen men steal for need. I have seen men steal for addiction. But you stole for sport. You treated the lives of the women around you as assets to be liquidated. You showed no remorse. You showed no humanity. You even attempted to pervert this court to further your abuse." Derek stood there, slumped, his suit jacket hanging off one shoulder. "I sentence you to 120 months in federal prison," the judge declared. 10 years, with no possibility of parole for the first 85% of your sentence, and I am recommending that you serve this time in a medium security facility. Given the sophisticated nature of your crimes, the gavel banged. It was the sound of a coffin lid closing. The bailiffs moved in to cuff him. They pulled his hands behind his back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was sharper than I expected. Derek didn't fight them. The energy was gone. He looked deflated, small, utterly ordinary. As they led him toward the side door that led to the holding cells, he stopped. He turned his head and looked at me one last time. I expected hatred. I expected him to scream a final curse. I expected the fire of the narcissist who refuses to believe he is lost. But there was no fire. His eyes were dull, like windows in an abandoned house. There was no Derek Redmond in there anymore. The persona he had built, the venture capitalist, the husband, the widower, the victim, had all been stripped away. What was left was a vacuum. He looked at me with a profound, terrifying emptiness. He wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at the architect who had designed his cage, and he finally understood that the walls were unbreakable. I held his gaze for a second, then I looked away. I looked at the exit sign above the main doors. "Goodbye, Derek," I whispered, though he couldn't hear me. The door clicked shut behind him. He was gone. I stood up. My legs felt light. Victoria was waiting for me in the aisle. She didn't say a word. She just nodded, a sharp, respectful dip of her chin. We had survived. I walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway where Leo was waiting. He didn't ask what happened. He saw my face. He handed me my coat. "It is done," I said. "Let us go home," Leo said. "Yes," I replied, buttoning my coat against the chill of the courthouse air conditioning. Let us go home. But as we walked down the marble steps, I knew that home wasn't a place anymore. It was this feeling, this quiet, unburdened, magnificent freedom. The debt was paid. The books were balanced. And for the first time in my life, I owned every single hour of my future. The silence that followed the sentencing of Derek Redmond was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum, instantly filled by the deafening roar of public opinion. I had walked out of that courthouse hoping to disappear into the quiet anonymity of my work. But the world had other plans. The image of me standing on the courthouse steps, head high, coat buttoned against the wind, had gone viral. Overnight, I ceased to be Sofia Valenti, the architect. I became a symbol. I was the face of the Phoenix Woman, a hashtag that trended for 3 weeks. I was the patron saint of every woman who had ever been gaslit, financially abused, or underestimated by a man in a suit. My office phone rang incessantly. It wasn't clients looking for blueprints. It was talk show producers. It was literary agents. It was podcast hosts who wanted me to dissect the trauma of my marriage for a 30-minute slot between ads for mattress toppers. A major publishing house offered me $2 million for a memoir. They already had a title picked out, Sleeping with the Enemy, My 7 Years in Hell. I sat in the conference room with the editor, a woman who looked at me with predatory sympathy. "It will be a bestseller, Sophia," she urged, sliding the contract across the glass table. "Women need to hear your story. They need to know the sordid details, the affairs, the forgery, the moment you knew it was over." I looked at the contract. $2 million. It was a lot of money. It was also a deal with the devil. If I signed it, I would be tethered to Derek forever. I would be selling my pain as entertainment. "No," I said, sliding the paper back. "I can get you $2.5 million, she countered. "You could offer me $10 million, I said gently. "The answer is no. I am an architect. I build things. I do not sell wreckage." I walked out of that meeting feeling lighter, but the pressure didn't vanish. It shifted. It landed squarely on the one thing I was trying desperately to protect: my relationship with Leo. Leo was a man of earth and wood. He liked quiet mornings and honest work. He did not like paparazzi waiting outside his truck. He did not like reading speculative articles about whether he was the rebound guy or the true love. We were eating dinner in my loft one evening, a simple pasta dish he had cooked, when I saw the tension in his shoulders. He had been quiet all week. "There is a photographer parked down the street," Leo said, not looking up from his plate. "He took a picture of me buying lumber today. He asked me if you were difficult to live with." "I am sorry," I said, the guilt twisting in my stomach. "It will pass. The news cycle moves fast." "It has been 6 months. Sophia," Leo said. He put his fork down. "I love you. You know that. I respect what you did, but I feel like I am living in a fishbowl. I cannot breathe in this city anymore. Everywhere we go, someone is whispering your name. I looked at him. I saw the fatigue in his eyes. He was right. We were trapped in the echo of the scandal. Chicago was no longer just a city. It was a stage where everyone knew my lines. Then let us leave, I said. Leo looked up. What? Let us leave, I repeated. Not forever, just for a while. Let us go somewhere where no one cares about Apex Horizon or Derek Redmond. Somewhere where the internet is slow and the air is real. Where? I smiled. Derek always refused to go anywhere south of the equator unless it was a 5-star resort in Brazil. He said South America was too dirty and too chaotic. He forbade me from going hiking in the Andes because he said it was unladylike to sweat. Leo's eyes widened. A slow grin spread across his face. The Andes? Pack your boots, I said. 2 weeks later, we were in Cusco, Peru. We didn't book a luxury hotel. We stayed in a hostel with peeling paint and a courtyard full of chickens. We didn't take a private car. We took a bus that rattled its way up the winding mountain roads, filled with locals carrying produce and textiles. For the first time in a year, nobody looked at me. Nobody whispered. I was just another traveler with a backpack and dusty boots. We hiked the Salcantay Trek. It was grueling. The air was thin, and my lungs burned with every step. There were moments when I wanted to quit, when the physical exhaustion triggered the old voice in my head, Derek's voice, telling me I was weak, that I wasn't cut out for this. But Leo was there. He didn't carry my pack for me. He didn't coddle me. He just walked ahead, turning back every few minutes to nod. You can do this. His eyes said, I am right here. On the 4th day. We reached a small village nestled in a valley that looked like it had been forgotten by time. The children there were playing soccer with a deflated ball. The schoolhouse was a crumbling structure of adobe with a leaking tin roof. We stopped to rest. The village elder, a man with skin like old leather, offered us tea. Through my broken Spanish, I learned that the rainy season made the school unusable for 3 months of the year. The government had promised funds, but they never arrived. I looked at the rotting beams of the school. I looked at Leo. We could fix this, Leo said. It wasn't a question. It was an observation. We don't have tools, I said. We have hands, he replied. And you have a sketchbook. We stayed in that village for 6 weeks. It became the most important project of my life. It wasn't a skyscraper. It wasn't a museum. It was a 3-room schoolhouse built from local stone, bamboo, and compressed earth. I sat in the dirt, drawing plans with a charcoal stick on the back of a map. I designed a roof system that would catch the rain and filter it for drinking water. I designed windows that maximized the sunlight to heat the rooms naturally. Leo organized the village men. He taught them how to mix the mortar so it would withstand the tremors of the earth. I worked alongside them, carrying stones until my hands were blistered and my back ached. There was no press release, there were no awards, but the day we finished, the entire village threw a fiesta. I stood back, watching the children run into the dry, warm classrooms, their laughter echoing off the new walls. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. I walked away from the noise of the party, finding a quiet spot by the river. I looked at my reflection in the water. I looked different. My skin was tanned, my hair was wild, and the tension lines around my mouth were gone. I forgive you, I whispered to the woman in the water. I wasn't forgiving Derek. I was forgiving myself. For 7 years, I had beaten myself up for being stupid enough to fall for a narcissist. I had hated myself for staying, for believing the lies, for wasting my youth. But looking at that school, looking at the life I had rebuilt, I realized that those 7 years hadn't been a waste. They were the fire that forged the steel. I was stronger because of the pain. I was kinder because of the cruelty I had endured. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Leo, you okay? He asked. I am better than okay, I said, leaning into him. I am free. When we returned to the States, everything had changed. The media cycle had moved on to a new scandal involving a politician. I was old news, and I was grateful for it, but there was one loose thread from the past that arrived in my mailbox a week after we landed. A heavy envelope with a California postmark. It was from Victoria. I opened it in the kitchen. Inside was a photograph. It showed Victoria, smiling and radiant, holding a baby boy with bright blue eyes. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize, a man with a kind face who was looking at the baby as if he held the entire universe. The letter was short. Dear Sophia. His name is Gabriel. He was born 3 weeks ago. The doctors said it was a healthy, boring birth. The best kind. The man in the picture is Mark. We met in a grief support group 6 months after the trial. He knows everything. He knows about Derek, about the fake pregnancy that wasn't fake, about the mess. He does not care. He just loves us. I wanted to thank you. You saved me. If you hadn't showed me that medical file in the coffee shop, I might have stayed. I might have married him. I might have let him use my son as a bargaining chip. You gave me the truth when it would have been easier to hate me. I hope you have found your peace. I have found mine. With love. Victoria. I pinned the photo to my refrigerator. The sisterhood of survivors. We had both walked through the fire, and we had both come out carrying life in our arms, her baby, and my freedom. Bianca came over for dinner that weekend. She popped a bottle of champagne. To the associate editor of the Chicago Tribune, she announced, clinking her glass against mine. You got the promotion, I cheered. The series on financial fraud won a regional award. Bianca grinned. They had no choice but to promote me. And the best part? I am launching a new investigative unit dedicated to corporate crimes. Derek Redmond was just the appetizer. I am going after the main course now. Just be careful, I warned. Always, she winked. So, what about you? Are you staying in the loft? It is a bit industrial for a woman who just built a bamboo school in Peru. No, I said, looking at Leo across the table. We are selling it. And the firm? I am keeping the name, I said. Valenti Architects stays. But we are moving the headquarters. I do not want to work in the penthouse anymore. I sold it to a tech incubator this morning. Let them have the view. I want something else. We moved 20 miles north, to a plot of land in Lake Forest that was overgrown with oak trees and silence. It wasn't a manicured suburb. It was a slice of wilderness on the edge of civilization. We didn't buy a house. We built one. It took us 2 years. We lived in a trailer on the property while we worked. It was the ultimate test of a relationship. Living in 200 square feet while building 4,000. But we didn't fight. We flowed. I designed a house that was the antithesis of the penthouse. The penthouse had been glass and steel, cold and exposing. This house was stone and cedar. It hugged the earth. It had a wraparound porch. It had a kitchen designed for cooking, not for catering. It had a studio for me with north-facing light, and a workshop for Leo with a garage door that opened to the woods. We didn't get married. We didn't need a piece of paper or a ceremony to prove we were committed. The house was our vow. Every nail, every board, every tile was a promise we made to each other. One evening in late autumn, the house was finally finished. The movers had left. The boxes were unpacked. I walked out onto the porch. The sun was setting, casting a golden light through the turning leaves of the oak trees. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. Leo came out behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. It is a good house, he said. It is an honest house, I corrected. I looked out at the yard. I imagined the future here. I imagined dogs running in the leaves. I imagined friends gathering on the porch. I imagined growing old in a place where the walls were built with love, not leverage. I thought about the woman who had stood in the penthouse window, watching the blizzard, waiting for a husband who hated her. That woman felt like a character in a book I had read a long time ago. She wasn't me anymore. "What are you thinking about?" Leo asked. I turned in his arms and kissed him. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was a kiss of deep, quiet familiarity. "I was thinking," I said. That I finally have a home where the phone doesn't have to ring for me to know I am wanted. Leo smiled. Welcome home, Sophia. I leaned back against the railing and watched the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned a brilliant shade of violet. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang the last note of the day. I took a deep breath. My chest expanded, filling with the cool air. There was no tightness, no anxiety, just the steady, rhythmic beating of my own heart, reborn and finally, completely, at peace. 3 years had passed since the heavy doors of the Federal Correctional Facility in Terre Haute slammed shut behind Derek Redmond. Time, I had learned, was not a straight line, it was a landscape. The first year had been a steep, rocky climb out of the canyon of trauma. The second year had been a plateau, a leveling out where the air grew thinner and clearer. And now, in the third year, I was standing on a summit I had never imagined I would reach. I was no longer the woman who jumped at the sound of a garage door opening. I was no longer the architect who hid her sketches in a drawer. I was Sophia Valenti, the owner of a firm that had just been commissioned to design the new public library in Seattle. I lived in a house made of cedar and stone, surrounded by trees that whispered ancient secrets to the wind. It was a Tuesday in October. The air was crisp, smelling of fallen leaves and wood smoke. I walked down the long gravel driveway to check the mailbox. I usually let Leo do this. He enjoyed the ritual of sorting the mail, separating the bills from the magazines, but he was in town picking up supplies for his workshop. I opened the metal box and pulled out a stack of envelopes, a utility bill, a wedding invitation from a former client, a catalog for gardening tools, and then, at the bottom of the stack, I saw it. It was a plain white envelope, thin and cheap. The return address was stamped in red ink. United States Penitentiary, Terre Haute, inmate number 89402. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Even after 3 years, the sight of those sharp, jagged letters sent a phantom shiver down my spine. It wasn't fear, it was a biological memory, like a scar that aches when the weather changes. I stood there at the end of the driveway, holding the letter. The wind rustled the dry leaves around my boots. My first instinct was to walk back to the house and feed it directly into the fireplace without opening it. Why invite his voice back into my head? Why let him breach the sanctuary I had built? But curiosity is a stubborn creature. I wasn't curious about how he was doing. I didn't care if he was rotting. I was curious because, for all the closure I had achieved, there was still one loose thread, one tiny, illogical knot in the tapestry of that night. Why? Why send that text? Why tell your wife, "Don't call me when you are on your way home to ask her for money"? It was the one tactical error that didn't fit his profile. Derek was a liar, but he was a calculated liar. That text had been sloppy. It had been suicidal. I walked back to the house, the gravel crunching under my feet. I went to the back porch and sat on the swing Leo had built. I took a deep breath of the cool autumn air. I tore open the envelope. There was a single sheet of lined yellow paper inside. The writing was cramped, smaller than I remembered, as if he was trying to take up as little space as possible. Sophia, I do not write this to ask for forgiveness. I know you. You have already categorized me as a lesson learned and moved on. You were always efficient like that. I am writing because I have a lot of time to think in here. All I have is time. I replay that night over and over again, the night of the blizzard, the night the door locked. You asked me once, during the deposition, why I sent that text. You asked why, if I needed your signature on the bridge loan so badly. I would antagonize you 5 minutes before walking through the door. You thought it was arrogance. You thought I just despised you so much I couldn't help myself. You were wrong. It wasn't arrogance. Sophia, it was an accident. I paused. An accident? I looked out at the tree line. I never meant to send that text to you. That night, I was in the back of the town car, stressed out of my mind. The crypto market was crashing. The lenders were calling. I needed the $400,000 from your house to stop the bleeding before the morning meeting. My plan was to come home, open the 1998 Margot, play the role of the devoted husband, and guilt you into signing the papers. But Victoria kept calling me. She was paranoid. She knew I was going home to you, and she was jealous. She kept blowing up my phone, threatening to show up at the penthouse if I didn't answer. I was drunk. I was panicked. I wanted to shut her up so I could focus on manipulating you. I typed the message. Don't call me. I'm closing a deal. You aren't the center of the universe. I meant to send it to her. I meant to tell my mistress to back off so I could scam my wife. But here's the joke. Sophia, here is the punchline that God played on me. To keep Victoria a secret. I didn't save her number under her name. I was too smart for that. But I also wanted to stroke my own ego. I wanted to feel like a man with two lives. So I saved her as Wifey Love in my contacts. It was a perfect cover. If you ever saw a text pop up from Wifey Love, you would assume it was my pet name for you. You would never suspect it was another woman. You were saved in my phone simply as wife that night, in the dark car, with the snow hitting the windows and the whiskey clouding my brain. I typed wife into the search bar of my messages. 2 names popped up. Wife, Wifey Love, my thumb slipped. I hit the first one. I hit you. I didn't realize it until I saw the lock on the door turn red. I didn't realize it until I saw the missed calls piling up. I stood in that hallway, freezing to death, realizing that my own cleverness had killed me. If I had just saved her as Victoria, or accountant, or anything else, I would be a free man today. I would be living in the penthouse. You would still be none the wiser. It wasn't your intuition that caught me. Sophia, it wasn't my cruelty. It was a typo. I thought you should know. The universe didn't save you. I saved you. By being a clumsy, arrogant fool who couldn't tell his wives apart. Don't write back. Derek. I lowered the paper. The silence of the woods seemed to deepen. Pressing in against my ears, I sat there, stunned by the sheer, banal absurdity of it. For 3 years, I had attributed my liberation to a moment of empowerment. I thought his text was a subconscious slip, a Freudian desire to be caught, or an act of supreme malice. But it was none of those things. It was a clerical error. He had tried to juggle 2 lives, 2 women, 2 lies. And because he was so committed to the deception, because he had to label his mistress with a name that mimicked his wife to cover his tracks, he had created the trap that snapped his own neck. If he had been honest about his contact names, he would have sent the text to Victoria. I would have welcomed him home. We would have had dinner. He might have convinced me to sign the loan. He might have drained my inheritance. We might still be married today, living a hollow, rotted life while he laughed behind my back. I let out a laugh. It started as a small huff of air and grew into a genuine, belly-shaking sound that startled a blue jay from the feeder. It was hilarious. It was the darkest, most perfect cosmic joke I had ever heard. Evil didn't fall because of a grand battle between light and dark. Evil fell because it tripped over its own shoelaces. A typo, I whispered to the wind. He lost everything because of a typo. I looked at the letter one last time. It didn't make me angry. It made me feel invincible. It confirmed what I had suspected but never fully articulated. Derek wasn't a monster of mythic proportions. He was just a small, messy man who was bad at data entry. I stood up and walked to the fire pit Leo had built in the center of the yard. There were still embers glowing from the fire we had the night before. I picked up a long stick and poked the coals until a small flame licked up. Hungry for fuel. I held the letter over the heat. The paper curled, browning at the edges. "Goodbye, Derek," I said. "Thank you for the mistake." I dropped the letter. The fire caught it instantly. The yellow paper turned black, the ink dissolving into smoke. I watched as the words Wifey Love and wife consumed each other, twisting into ash that floated up into the canopy of the oak trees. I watched until there was nothing left but gray flakes. I brushed my hands off on my jeans. I felt clean. The last question mark had been straightened into an exclamation point. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I pulled it out. The screen lit up against the twilight. It wasn't a notification from a bank. It wasn't a threat from a lawyer. It wasn't a typo from a man juggling lies. It was a text from Leo. Just Leo. No nicknames, no codes, just the man who knew me. Leo. Heading back now. Got the cedar planks. Also picked up some fresh salmon and that wine you like. Come home for dinner? I will cook. I looked at the message. Simple, direct, honest. I typed my reply. I didn't have to think about who I was sending it to. There was only one person in my world now. Sophia. I am already home, and I'm starving. I slid the phone back into my pocket. The sun was setting behind the house, painting the sky in strokes of bruised purple and burning gold. It was the kind of sunset that Derek would have ignored because he was too busy looking at his stock portfolio. I walked to my car. I didn't need to leave. But I wanted to drive. I wanted to feel the motion of the vehicle under my control. I wanted to drive toward the horizon, not to escape, but to celebrate. I pulled out of the driveway, the gravel popping under the tires. I turned onto the country road that wound through the forest. I rolled the windows down. The cold air rushed in, tangling my hair, stinging my cheeks. It felt like life. I turned on the radio. Music filled the cabin, drowning out the silence of the past. I drove west, chasing the dying light. The rearview mirror reflected the empty road behind me. There was no one following me. There were no ghosts in the back seat. The road ahead was unpaved and uncertain, but it was mine. I thought about the 155 missed calls that had started this journey. They felt like a lifetime ago. Tonight. My phone was silent. Tonight. The only call I had to answer was the one I made to myself, and for the first time in 10 years. I liked the sound of my own voice. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate liberation. And I hope Sophia's strength resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a quiet room, on your commute, or maybe while working on your own dreams? Please leave a comment below telling me your location and your thoughts on Derek's final confession. Do you think it was karma, or just pure luck? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel. Hit that like button to support us. And don't forget to press the hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need a reminder that even the darkest winters eventually turn into spring. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next story.